Uber may have landed Microsoft as a backer. We look at the company's new $50 billion valuation. I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg West. Coming up, could Apple be planning to roll out a new TV set-top box in September? We look at the report that has tech blogs buzzing. Plus, $10 billion wiped off Samsung's market cap in the last month. We look at what the company can do to improve its smartphone business. And Expedia shares hit their highest value since its spin-off from IAC. I sit down with the company's CFO to talk about competition from Google and Airbnb. All of that ahead on Bloomberg West. First, to our lead, Microsoft is considering an investment in Uber at a valuation of about $50 billion. But a final decision hasn't been made. Microsoft declined to comment, but Uber recently bought a portion of Microsoft's Bing mapping unit from the software giant, and the two are integrating Uber into Microsoft's Cortana voice-controlled assistant. That means you could hail an Uber, synced with Microsoft devices. Bloomberg's Dina Bass is on the phone. She covers Microsoft for us. Also with me here in the studio, Homebrew VC founder Hunter Walk. He'll be my guest host for the show today. Also, Technalysis research founder Bob O'Donnell and IDC's chief research officer Crawford Prete. Thank you all for joining us. Dina, I'm going to start with you because the Wall Street Journal is reporting that this deal with Microsoft is closed. You say a deal ain't done yet. What's really happening?
Yes, Emily. I was told definitively that Microsoft has not, past tense, participated in a round, has not made an investment, but rather that they're considering making an investment. There are discussions ongoing, and the valuation, as you mentioned, would be at about $50 billion. And that's what I've heard from a person who asked not to be identified because the deal is private and nothing's been announced publicly yet. But that is my understanding. That is under discussion. It is not final.
Well, if this happens, it would mean Microsoft, Google, and Amazon are all investors in Uber. Hunter, I'm curious to hear from you, as someone who worked at Google. The relationship between Uber and Google has gotten a bit tense as they've become more competitive. They're both working on self-driving cars, for example. But what do you make of Microsoft now getting into the game?
I think this is actually about Microsoft's transformation from a desktop company to a mobile company. Since Satya Nadella has come on board, he's made some smart acquisitions of startups, started to put those folks in charge of Outlook, Exchange, trying to bring Office outside of just the Microsoft OS into the Apple environment. And when you think about what people are doing with their phones that they couldn't do with their desktop, hailing a car, logistics, Uber's information about the local grid is pretty compelling.
Bob?
Well, I think it's part of, along the lines of what Hunter said, it's also part of Microsoft moving into the notion of services. And this is arguably another kind of service that's being integrated that they're participating in. Plus, let's be honest, if they're going to be an investor, then there's maybe some incentive for Uber to be using Azure and other Microsoft-based services on the back end. So I do think it's a reflection of this change in how we think about Microsoft, what they do, and the areas that they think are important strategically moving forward.
In thinking about this, I'm reminded of Facebook's $50 billion valuation ahead of its IPO and its partnership with Microsoft. Crawford, what's your take here on this potential partnership?
Yeah, as Bob was just saying, from my standpoint, this is about information transformation and information management. When we look at digital transformation of companies, it's about leveraging your information. And if Microsoft can help companies leverage their information, that's a win for the company. And I think that they are in a position to do, Uber's in a position to do that, and Microsoft's in a position to help Uber differentiate that.
Hunter, what do you make of this $50 billion valuation? I know we've been talking about it, but now it's confirmed. But is Uber worth that? Where's Uber going?
If there's strategic value to the investor, the valuation's almost secondary. We've seen these last few rounds of growth capital, rumored to sort of be protected on the downside. So if you're putting money in, you're pretty sure you're going to get at least that back. Uber's in that phase where you can imagine them doing anything. They've talked about and experimented in a lot of adjacent markets. Of the companies you mentioned that have strategically invested in them, they remind me most of Amazon. They're an algorithm that just churns through information, finds a bulkhead, and then starts moving into adjacencies.
That's interesting. What do you think of that?
Well, I agree with that on one hand. On the other hand, I'll be honest with you. I'm one of these people, I look at an Uber, I'm like, Really? $50 billion? That seems like a business that could be, upset relatively quickly by a number of different factors, be it geopolitical issues, be it, licensing types of issues within cities,
John
all those kinds of
from
things.
Greylock told me he thought it could be a $500 billion company. So you've got people on the far opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, but if they, to Hunter's point, if they, move into a lot of different areas that we haven't really thought about, and if it's about driving algorithms and efficiencies in existing systems, and they can figure out interesting ways to extend beyond just hailing cars, I guess who knows?
Dina, how do you think this is going to play out? Does it seem like this is a deal that, even if it's not closed yet, will close?
I think it's pretty hard to say at this point. I mean, as everyone's been discussing, this fits a bit more into what Satya Nadella has had for Microsoft's strategy. It's a services company, it's a cloud company, and a mobile company, and that's precisely what they've shown so far in their Uber integrations. What they've had is, they have Office. Office knows your calendar, and so they feel that it's a value-added service if their voice-enabled assistant, Cortana, can look at your calendar and say, hey, you have a meeting coming up in 20 minutes. The meeting's only 5 minutes away, but we know based on traffic that it's actually going to take you 20 minutes to get there. Do you want us to call an Uber for you now?
It's certainly interesting to consider the potential. We'll continue to follow this story. Dina Bass, Bloomberg News, thanks so much. Hunter Walk of Homebrew, Bob O'Donnell of Technalysis, Crawford Prete of IDC. You are sticking with me. First, though, I want to talk about Expedia. Shares surged to a new high after the online travel site reported strong second quarter results. Earlier today, I spoke to Expedia's CFO, Mark Okerstrom, in an exclusive interview and asked him about competition with Google.
Our story with Google is twofold. On one side, Google is a huge player. They're a dominant player in the search industry. And really we have one interest there, is to make sure that we get a fair shake at advertising placements, a fair shake in organic results, having our leading brands show up. On the other side, though, Google has been a great customer acquisition channel for us, both in their traditional paid search product, their hotel price ads product, potentially in this new Google Book product, can be a great source of new customers, and to that extent, we've got a great relationship.
He also told me Expedia wasn't seeing or feeling much competition from Airbnb. I asked him whether he'd consider a partnership.
You will continue to see us move further into the vacation rental industry, whether with HomeAway, and we're certainly open to other partnerships as well. With respect to Airbnb and competition, I'll tell you right now that we're not seeing a huge amount of impact on our business. As a reminder, our room nights grew 35% year over year in this past quarter. We're certainly looking at this as an adjacency, an opportunity, and right now we've got a lot of runway just in our core business.
Mark Okerstrom, CFO of Expedia. Coming up, fresh buzz on an update to Apple TV. What does it say about the company's future streaming business? And these people are seeing color for the very first time. This story is so cool. We meet the team behind a pair of glasses that corrects color blindness. Apple may be releasing a new set-top box this September. Keyword may, according to BuzzFeed. The report says the updated version will have better storage, a faster processor, improved operating system. It also reportedly comes with an app store and a software development kit. It'll work supposedly with Siri. Apple declined to comment, but what could a new Apple TV set-top box mean for the company's future in media? Homebrew VC partner Hunter Walk with me here, my guest host for the show. Also, we have IDC's Chief Research Officer Crawford Prete via Skype, and our Technalysis research founder Bob O'Donnell with me here in San Francisco. Crawford, I want to start with you. I've got the very first Apple TV set-top box. I still use it all the time, but haven't felt the need for an upgrade. How much better does this new set-top box, how much better could it be, and will it be the update that encourages people to upgrade?
Hey, Emily, I think it can get a lot better. I think that there are definitely apps they could develop to be more engaging. If you look at what Comcast has done with Xfinity, for example, they've added a voice-enabled controller, a voice-enabled remote control. They've added apps that allow you to get scores from one show or from a game while you're watching another show. There's a lot of stuff that Apple could add to make it a more engaging experience, and I absolutely think voice is top on the list.
Hunter, you worked at YouTube for many, many years. You were also a writer on late-night television. You wrote for Conan. But how optimistic are you about the potential for Apple to be a big player in the streaming media business?
I think ultimately they have a shot to be quite a significant player, but it's not just because of an Apple TV device, it's because of the iOS ecosystem and the fact that we already have a remote control in our pocket or on our desk in the iPhone and the iPad. If you look at Amazon's bestseller list, though, the Fire Stick and Google Chromecast have been #1 and #2 for months over months over months. So Apple's coming late to this party of making more and more dumb TVs into smart devices. They've called it a hobby, but I think they need to turn it into something serious pretty quick.
Bob, what do you think this signifies about a potential streaming service, which, as far as we've heard, has been pushed back, pushed back, pushed back, pushed back, and a TV set has been shelved?
Yeah, I think it's actually an independent thing. It's easy to throw the two together, but my guess is any TV service they offer is going to work on existing Apple TV boxes too. They're not going to want to make it just work with the newest devices, I think. But what this does, as Crawford pointed out, is it allows them to have more horsepower so that they can run applications and do things like overlay content from one program onto another program and do the kinds of things that, frankly, I saw in smart TV demos 10 years ago that we still haven't really seen in the marketplace.
Now, I want to make a quick turn to Samsung because Samsung, as I mentioned earlier, $10 billion wiped off Samsung's market cap. They really misjudged how many S6, Galaxy S6 phones and S6 Edge phones were going to sell. Crawford, to you, Samsung has now lost its dominant position in China. Apple and Xiaomi are jockeying for the top spot there. Is Samsung in jeopardy of losing its dominance in the global smartphone market?
Yeah, they are. I mean, they absolutely are in jeopardy of losing it. But I will tell you that the progress out of that company is significant. I think when you look at the two most recent products that they brought out, they've frankly never been better. And yeah, they blew it on demand, but in terms of forecasting demand. But I would actually I would say that 6 months ago, what you're seeing in the results today represent the bad decisions that were made 6 months and a year ago. And I actually think that they're now on an upswing, and we may be seeing kind of a bottom here for Samsung.
Bob?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are challenges for the smartphone market, period. And that's going to impact Samsung. It's eventually, I think, even going to impact Apple.
But what about the upgrade cycle? Is that speeding up?
And I don't think it is. I think it's lengthening. And I think that's one of the challenges that they're facing. We're also seeing that on the high end, where Samsung has focused a lot of their efforts, it's going to be very, very difficult. The other thing is, I think we're seeing the transformation of Samsung as a company. It's going to be harder and harder to make money on devices. They're looking at more and more on the semiconductor and component side, and there's better margins there. It's a much different company, just like Sony has evolved. I think Samsung may follow a similar type of path.
What about the brand? I mean, even Tom Brady is using
I was going to say, the earnings announcement wasn't great, but Tom Brady saying he threw out his S6 to switch to an iPhone, and that's why he couldn't turn data over to the NFL investigators. That might have been the biggest loss of the week.
All right, well, we're going to continue to watch Samsung. Bob O'Donnell, thank you so much for joining us of Technalysis. Crawford Del Prete of IDC. Hunter, you're sticking with me. Now it is time for the latest in our Bloomberg West series, Bioengineering the Senses, a closer look at the technology on the frontiers of medical science. How to fix color blindness. We meet the Berkeley scientists behind a new pair of glasses that seem to solve the problem.
Are these all the same?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
All those colors across the street looked like they were the same color a few minutes ago.
Those leaves up there are pretty amazing, too.
They're seeing real color for the very first time.
Yeah. Wow.
Color blindness affects 1 in 200 women, but as many as 1 in 12 men. That's 30 million people in the U.S. alone. Now, for $429, researchers at EnChroma in Berkeley, California, say these glasses could make life more colorful for about 80% of colorblind people.
Somebody who has normal color vision, the blue, the green, and the red are separated from each other. Someone with color deficiency, the green and the red cones overlap too much. So the glasses work by simply going in there, and if you can visualize, it's just cutting out certain wavelengths of light.
The magic is in the lenses, modeled from substances called dyes. They cut out a small part of the light spectrum, mainly the wavelengths corresponding to yellow light, while letting the rest of the light shine through. The effect is in the colors, like greens and reds jump apart from each other, making the difference between the colors more clear.
People get kind of quiet when, well, I think it's simply that they're just getting a lot of information. Those neural mechanisms are finally firing. They're seeing things they've never seen before.
When I first put the glasses on, I can actually see a lot of difference. Flowers, even all the way over, are just amazing.
It's an immediate sense that something is different, but minute 1, minute 2, once I started to figure out kind of what colors were different, especially for me, red and purple were extremely pronounced. This is a very overwhelming kind of palette of colors to look at.
Under development for a decade, supported by funding from the National Institutes of Health, EnChroma has raised just $1.5 million in angel funding.
It's been a bit of a struggle because there aren't really a whole lot of venture capitalists that specialize in the optical field in particular and consumer packaged goods.
Nevertheless, the company is developing glasses for indoor color vision and with prescription lenses, and has ambitions to break into the pediatrics market. And beyond that, let's see what comes out of their research into contact lenses for the colorblind.
All right, I'm not colorblind, but I'm wearing my EnChroma glasses now, and all the colors look a lot more intense. I definitely think this is a company worth checking out. And that does it for our Bioengineering the Senses series this week. Stay with us for continued coverage of developments in biotech. We're going to be covering that a lot more right here on Bloomberg West. Coming up, where in the world is the fastest supercomputer? It's not the U.S., and President Obama needs to change that. And it is time now for the Daily Bite, one number that tells a whole lot today. It's 1 quintillion. That's a 1 with 18 zeros after it. President Obama has issued an executive order for U.S. researchers to build the world's fastest computer, a machine capable of performing a quintillion operations per second. The U.S. is trying to gain an upper hand on China, which currently has the fastest machine. Intel is working on a system that could potentially run at 180 quadrillion ops per second. Russia, India, and the EU are all working on similar projects. Well, with over 3 billion downloads, Angry Birds has dominated Apple's top-selling app charts and is one of the most successful mobile games ever created. This week, an official sequel was finally released. We sat down with the game's creative director.
Most of the other games have been like spin-offs or mashups or completely different genre. This is the first game that's like truly the sequel in terms of it's the same universe and it's completely new gameplay. So there's a lot of new stuff in there that kind of justifies that it is called 2. We're working with a whole new game engine now from the previous games, so it's way more modern, uses the hardware much better. We have 3D. So the gameplay is still like 2D kind of action you see from the sideway. You just fling the birds as usual, but all the graphics and stuff flying towards the screen, it's much more immersive graphics with 3D. The business has changed completely. Like if you want to be downloaded at all on the App Store now, you have to be free. That's just the way it is. I think there's room for both types of games, like free-to-play games, premium games. I think for the casual game, like Angry Birds, free is the way to go. And we've been very careful how we balance it, so it feels fair that everything can be accessed by everyone, so you don't have to pay anything.
Back here now with my guest host, Homebrew VC founder, Hunter Walk. Thanks so much for being here. I was reminded when you were coming on the show today that it's been 2.5 years since you started your own venture capital firm.
That's
and
right.
I'm curious, what's been the hardest surprise?
I think the biggest surprise for me has actually been how many of the entrepreneurs that we see that I end up rooting for. Of course, we may only make about 8 to 10 investments a year because we're playing a lead role in these financings. But there's a lot of people who come in with great ideas, early traction, and what I'm really trying to decide is, is it the right fit? Not, are they viable?
Right. You've invested in Ship. You've invested in the Skim, managed by Q. How are valuations? How do prices look to you right now?
You know, I'll tell you, 2013 was a real learning for us. Valuations were going up pretty quickly in the seed stage. I think since that time, they've stabilized somewhat. One trend we are seeing is that experienced entrepreneurs may be skipping the seed round altogether more often and going straight to raising a large sum of money. We're not afraid to participate in those rounds, but we usually love to take a larger chunk of a smaller round as somebody's just getting started.
The Information does a regular survey of its readers, and today they talked about skepticism around certain companies, which is a hard thing to measure, but they said that there's been rising skepticism around Square, Dropbox, Lyft, Airbnb, on the other hand, very positive. What should we read into those kinds of reports? I mean, it's something that's difficult to put your finger on, but I wonder, are there whispers that things are worse than people say publicly?
I think, you know, a lot of these companies are getting to high valuations, and we're used to seeing public numbers when these companies are at these valuations, because traditionally they would have IPO'd and you'd be getting progress quarter over quarter. Because we don't have access to that, all you get to judge on is their latest app release or your own personal experience. So, you know, it's interesting, but I'm not sure it necessarily tells the truth of what's going on inside of it.
So you're not concerned. Are you concerned about the overall environment?
I'm not. You know, sometimes people say, are we in a bubble? I think we're in a hot tub. It's getting a little bit warm. We're in that part of the business cycle, and there's lots of small bubbles, but they tend to pop very quickly.
And you guys recently hired a head of talent, right?
We did. That's a little unusual for a firm that invests at the early stage, but we think that in continuing to help our companies become not just great builders of product and businesses, but attractive places to hire the best engineers and the best designers is a competitive advantage.
Now, I have to ask you about Twitter, because you're a big tweeter, but I'm curious, what do you want to see happen at Twitter?
I want to see them grow. I mean, the fact that they have, you know, we talk about growth numbers, a few 100 million users. The question I ask myself, is there content on Twitter today that 1 billion people would enjoy consuming and talking about? And the answer is absolutely. It just has to be exposed.
Team Jack or Team Bane?
Bane is so nice, isn't that the
He's so nice.
I think product-oriented founders are a unique breed. In this case, you know, it's as I said, it's a full-time role, and Jack might not be available full-time. And so at least in Adam, you have somebody who was the founder of the monetization group. He started something that didn't exist before.
Team both. All right, Hunter Walk, Homebrew VC, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you back.
Thank you, Emily.
Before we go, it is Silicon Valley's version of the royal baby. Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and his wife Priscilla Chan are expecting a baby girl. Zuckerberg also opened up about some personal details, saying the couple had 3 miscarriages until now. So congratulations, Mark Zuckerberg, and have a great weekend.